Welcome to Retro Scale Modelling. This is part 4 of the Revell USS United States Scale 1 to 96. This part I'm putting on some of the furniture onto the deck, so predominantly the ship's wheel, the little cleats, the little eyelets that you have to put in around. I'm also going to be filling the gaps on the deck and repainting that and going around generally tidying up before the next stage. So let's get into the build. So to start with, I'm pre-painting some of the iron. These are the little rigging blocks I'm painting, and these are getting painted in Revell Aquacolor 382 Wood Brown. And once that's dry, I'm using Tamiya's XF84 Dark Iron to go over them, and this gives it a used worn look. So it's just a very light coat that I'm using. As you can see, I just draw my brush over it, just scraping on the paint. Hardly anything's going on. Some will have a deeper colour than the others to give it contrast. So if you do it this way, remember you don't really want them all to be exact same colour. So you can afford to be a bit messy when you're doing this. I'm using Revell Aquacolor 09 Anthracite, and this is for the railings on the stern of the ship, where the hardcastle is right at the back, and there's sort of railings that go all around it, which will be painted in this colour. I initially painted it in white and realised it was the wrong colour, so that's why the part here is white. So next is the ship wheeled, and it's time to assemble this now that the pre-painting has been done. I done that on the previous video. So it's just a little bit of cement to marry the two halves together. It's best to leave this to dry for a little while. So on to the next part, and what I'm doing here is putting in the two stanchions that fit onto the wheel. So these are going to be free moving, the wheel's going to be free moving. So just place one in initially, then take your wheel and the rope that was coming up through the deck and wrap that around the central spindle of the wheel. When you come to the end, just a little bit of cement on the end of the rope and pull it straight with your tweezers here, and let it just rest onto the coil, and it should harden enough not to flop out. And then lastly, for the last pillar support, so that just pops in, and before it dries, just attach the wheel to it. Again, if you want it free moving, you don't put any cement where the wheel is attached. Next up is to fill in the gaps on the deck that where the deck meets, and I'm using my own filler here. This is a melted down sprue with cement, which creates an excellent filler, and I'm just using a lobstering stick here to put it on, just throwing it over the gap. I then use a damp piece of kitchen towel just to wipe off any excess. If you do that straight away before it hardens, you'll get any excess off without leaving any residue onto the deck, which will cause a problem for sanding and things like that later on. So it's better to get it off straight away, and it should leave the filler in the gap that it's filling up. So just adding a little bit more to this section, and same process, then taking it a bit out and see it coming off there, and the gap is still filled in. So it's back to the stern, and it's time to put on the framework that I painted earlier, and the recess points on it are just at the top here, as you can see, and it just fits in there with a little bit of cement. It won't be long now before I'm able to close this up. So I'm using Revell Aquacolor 88 Ochre Brown. This is just to repaint the areas which I've filled up. And so I'm going back down the two-step process of putting the main colour down before I stain it with the light colour. So next up is the other cradles for the cannons. So I'm painting these in red, Camite 60% of that, and then it's 17 African brown 30%, and white 10%, and this makes up this terracotta sort of colour. So it's bottom of the deck, and I'm using light colour LPW19 wooden deck shadow. Now this is just the last coat of this after I filled the gaps up, but I am putting it all over the deck again, and the reason for that is because although you don't mind the different patches of colour because you're using different layers of paint, you do want it to be somewhat level. I'm using Revell Aquacolor 382 wood brown, and this is for these little pegs here. These little pegs, these are designed to hold your rope or on the ship, and they'll be dotted around all over the ship. So I'm just pre-painting them now. The actual pegs themselves are painted in Mr. Hobby H37 wood brown. And once they're dry, it's time to place them onto the ship. This first set of a recess point, you can see at the top of the picture there, is quite deep, so it's excellent for this to set in. So it's just a bit of cement and they get placed in. And then it's time to put in all the little cleats around the deck. So all these little rings here, there's quite a few to put in. Now I should point out as well that there's also a few to put on around the side. You can actually see the markings on the white background there. Now the instruction says put them on now, but I won't be putting them on until I put the cannons on. If you remember how I put the lower deck cannons on, I'll be using that same process. So putting them all on a piece of rope, stringing them along, then doing the cannons one at a time. So it's back to more pre-painting, and this is Mr. Hobby H37 wood brown, and these are for the grids that go on the deck. So I'm using the Revell Aquacolor 382 wood brown again, and these are for the ladders and all the other little bits and pieces that are going onto the deck. And then it's back onto the railing guardrails around the stern of the ship, and that's Revell 09 Acrosite. It's now time to put all the pre-painted parts onto the model, so I'm just making this up. Can't remember what it's called, but it's a bendy pipe thing. And once it's bonded, I'm using Revell Aquacolor 09 Acrosite just to touch up the seams. And now I'm putting on the grates first of all. It's important to look at the order that you're going to put these things on. If there's anything touching or going near the part that you're putting on, make sure that you're going to put them in the right order because they can encroach. So have a plan in your head before you start building this part. It very quickly gets very cramped on the deck, so it's a good idea. Just take a few minutes out to look how you're going to do it. And obviously dry fitting is essential as well. It helps with the building plan process, but that goes without saying. A case in point, in building here the railings that go around the mast, and the instructions say build it on the deck, but I've had a look at it. I think it's better to build this up off the deck before it gets placed in. Now I've already checked the location points for this to see whether they fit or not, and of course it does, and they can only go in one way because the recesses are half moon shaped, so they can only go in one way. But I found it easier to build half of it on the bench before actually placing on. So there you can see half of it built before I close up the square. There is no right or wrong way in this process, it's whatever you feel comfortable with. I found the steps to be a little bit tricky to place in, so I'm just placing the first one in here, and as you can see, it's a bit of a tight angle. I should have used a different set of tweezers and an angle set to put them in, or I could have loosely attached them before I put the deck on. Either way, it was a bit tricky to build, but eventually I did get them in. I always think it's better as well to start at one end then work your way down. as well. But the things like the steps and the ladders, try and get them in first no matter what, because the less room you have while you're filling up the deck, the more difficult it is going to be to fit them. So here I'm just fitting in the lifeboat supports, and there's a few of them to fit, and try and not get mixed up when you're fitting these. There's certain ones go in certain locations. If you're cutting them off the sprue all in one, which I did, I put them on my bench in order that I'm going to be fitting them, so I didn't get confused which ones go where. But the location points are sized differently from each one as well to help you out, but it's easy to get confused on it. So I'm just touching up the paint as I go along here. If you're like me and prefer to pre-paint before you put the part on, this part of the process is unavoidable. You're always going to have to touch up your paint to some degree. So the next ladder is going to, and found this one a little bit easier than the first, even though the caption was interfering with trying to get my tweezers in, and it was the same with the last steps as well. Took a little bit of perseverance to get this in. Next is the mid-mast or central mast railings. Like the bow ones, the location points are similar, so they did fit in quite easily. Don't necessarily have to make these ones up off the bench, which is nice. They have a strange configuration, though. There's one straight one and one curved one to put on, and they're very tight together. And last I go on with the grates for the covers here. These just slipped in very nicely. Each one is a slightly different size, so just make sure you've got the right one. And move to the stern of the ship. There's a couple of pillar things that go in here. They just slot in. There's not much to say about these, but they do go in between the grates, so this is why you have to fit the grate first. So it goes back in to make sure you know how the build's going to go as you're going along. So as you can see, onto the second set of cannons here. These are made up exactly like the first ones. I'm building them on the sprue first of all. I'm then using Revell Aquacolor 09 anthracite for the markings on these cannon cradles. 16 of them have these markings, and 6 don't, so you are going to have to keep them separate. There is one larger cradle that you have to make up. It's a simple construction, but it's a lot larger than the other cradle. This is to hold one of the main cannons. The best way to make it up is build one half, so you're putting in the cannon and the floor support and the axles, and then you add on the other side support. On the side support there is also 2 little plates or ringlets that go on to the side, and these will be used to tie down the actual cannon on the deck. So what's left to do now is just place the cannons on the cradle. There's quite a lot to do, so this will actually bring part 4 to an end. I'll just finish these up before I finish up. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the other videos in my channel, and indeed the other parts of this build. Subscribe to the channel if you liked what you've seen, and indeed hit the like button and leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.